Today we are going to compare the first Overstreet price guide from 1970 with the second from 1972. We're going to look for the growth and changes in the prices of the most valuable books and any books that were starting to heat up and take notice. So let's start off by looking at the most valuable comics in the 1972 Overstreet Annual Price Guide. This book was a very important one as it was the first full-fledged book. They added 70 pages worth of new listings. The details were in more detail. This was the first edition that had a whole bunch of advertisers from comic book dealers and a nice square-bound format. Really nice book. And we see that in this book, Action Comics #1 ranked once again as the most valuable comic book of them all. In the 1972 guide, it was worth $350 in good condition. That is low grade. And we'll see that that is a massive jump from $200 in the first guide. And on our chart, just for comparison's sake, we also show the good value price in the 2016 Overstreet price guide. So you can see how drastic prices have jumped on some of these key books in the last 4 decades. Whiz Comics ranks #2. This is the first appearance of Captain Marvel. At this time, it was a major key book and made a big jump from ranking 5th in the original Overstreet price guide to #2 this year. And in fact, we see it doubled in price. That was quite a drastic jump. In fact, it landed up knocking Detective Comics #27 down a slot to #3. So at this time, Captain Marvel was worth more than Batman when dealing with first appearances. Marvel Comics #1 from 1939 had a hefty price jump as well, being Timely's most valuable comic, but it also got bumped down a slot, now ranking at 4th. And Superman #1 got bumped a slot down to #5. These books all had huge price increases, but not as big as Whiz Comics that jumped ahead of them all. Captain America #1 also had a hefty jump, almost doubling, and it actually moved up in its rank, up to 6th place. Batman held steady at 7. Some surprises coming next is that Famous Funnies jumped into the top 10 from 1934. This is the first ongoing comic book series in the modern standard format, a very important historical series, and at this time in the early 70s, collectors really felt this was an important book, so here it is ranking in the top 10 most valuable comics. It doesn't do that anymore. And Walt Disney's Comics and Stories also made a huge jump. It doubled in price from the first guide to the second guide. Now at $150, leapt up to #9 position. And that was the most valuable Dell comic and the most valuable Disney comic at the time. King Comics, #10, fell in its rank. It did still increase in price, but just not at the same pace as a bunch of other books. So what we find interesting is that in the first Overstreet price guide, we had less than 10 books that were worth over $100. But now in the second edition, we've got 25 comics now with that. And a bunch of books made massive jumps up the chart. Some of the ones that stand out include More Fun Comics #52 with the first appearance of the Spectre. A massive leap up from 40th place up to 13th. That's quite a jump in rank. And that showed that this was when it was finally proving its popularity, which has held to this date. Jumbo Comics #1 from Fiction House. This was their first title back in 1938. This oversized comic features the first work of Jack Kirby, and it jumps up in rank from 43rd to 21st this year, and it doubled in value in a single guide. Action Comics #2 also did that, jumping way up in rank up to #22 this time. It doubled in price. And there was a big boom for Donald Duck related books, and therefore 4-Color Comics #4 doubled in price, and 4-Color Comics #9 more than doubled, jumping from 96th place in the first guide all the way up to 24th. In 25th position, we'll see Mickey Mouse book. This is the oldest comic listed in the Overstreet price guide at this time, dated from 1930, published by Bebo. This was the origin of Mickey Mouse, and this predates the comic book format, actually, and it did not even appear in the first Overstreet price guide, so this was its first listing, and they listed it at a hefty $100. Now, it's interesting, over the years, this book has not actually seen very much increase, but at this time it made a big splash when people discovered it. Detective Comics number 3 made a big jump, almost doubling, featuring Batman's 4th cover, and this is his origin issue. Lots of interest in that one. Black and White, the large feature number 16, featuring Donald Duck, also made a decent jump from $50 to $75, and you'll see in that area a whole bunch of books did the same thing. High Spot ranks number 41 with issue number 2. Published by Holly, this is written by Edgar Burroughs. This was an oddball book that was listed in the Overstreet Guide number 2, with a big jump from $15 to $75. Another big jumper is 4-Color at number 16, featuring Mickey Mouse. It almost quadrupled in price. And Mickey Mouse Magazine, 1933, the original magazine series, the first 9 issues are listed in this price guide for the first time. Did not get listed in the first one, and they're all listed with a $75 hefty price. So some books are making massive jumps, but already there's some market corrections and some books land up falling. If we go down the chart down to number 79, we'll see New Book of Comics, number 1 from DC. This was the reprint annual. And 1936, it was not listed at all in the first Overstreet price guide, and so it's listed here for the first time at $60. And another interesting book that became a hot book at this time, lots of demand for Frank Frazetta art, and so his work on Thunda, number 1 from 1952, tripled in price in a year. Ranking at number 80, it jumped from $20 to $60. That's a pretty hefty price tag in 1972. Keep in mind, at this time, comics were still just turning 20 cents cover price at that time. So $60 for a low-grade 50s comic was almost unheard of. There are very few comics from the 1950s on this list. And here's one of the few ones. The Funnies, number 1 from 1936, Dell Comics. The first issue had a hefty $60 price tag in the first guide, but they actually lowered it in the new guide, and so its ranking overall fell drastically from 30th place all the way down to 90th position this time around. You can see that the demand for general Golden Age books is pretty strong across the board. Late 30s and early 40s books from all publishers were in demand, especially number 1 issues and any superhero books and origin issues. We go down the list a little bit further, down to number 121. Big Shot doubled in price from Columbia Comics. Special ranks 122. It did not even appear in the first guide, and now it's listed at $50 from MLJ Publications. Captain Marvel Adventures, number 2, doubled in price, as did Walt Disney's Comics and Stories, number 4. Black and White, large feature, number 20, did not rank with a value in the first guide, and now it's listed at $50. And 4-Color 29, featuring Donald Duck by Carl Barks, more than doubled. And Donald Duck No Number, one-shot from 1938 from Whitman, did not appear in the first guide, and here it shows up for the first time with a $50 price tag. With the onslaught of many books increasing in just slow but decent increases, most books from the first to the second guide jumped $5 or $10. Doesn't sound like a lot, but at the time, percentage-wise, that is quite a decent jump. Some of these books, in fact, the majority of the books jumping from 10 to 20% from the first guide to the second guide. There is 201 comics with a $40 or higher price tag in the 1972 price guide. And there was now 241 comics listed in total with a price of $35 or higher. A couple books that used to rank higher in the chart fell, like the comics number 1 from Dell, 1937, had a $30 price tag in the first guide and fell drastically to $20 this time around. Now let's take a look at the most important Silver Age comics and see how their growth was happening in the new 1972 Overstreet price guide. it was pretty consistent overall. The only really big jumper we'll see is Fantastic Four #1. Had easily proven it was the most valuable Silver Age book in the 1970 guide, and this continued in the new guide, where we see the price drastically jumped up. In low grade, good condition, it jumped from $20 to $30, and in near mint, it jumped from $30 to $40. Notice that the spread is still very small. It's not even double from low grade to highest grade. Of course, this is going to change over the decades. What else do we see standing out? Well, Showcase #4 is starting to get a bit more attention, and it has now jumped up, and it has a $20 near mint price, making it the second most valuable Silver Age comic at the time. And Amazing Fantasy #15, with the first appearance of Spider-Man, made a small increase, holding at $12 in good, but it moved up from 16 to 18 in near mint. Still a pretty expensive book. Now it's 10 years old at this time. Comics are 20 cents at the newsstand, but you could buy the first Spider-Man for $18 in near mint condition. And you could also buy Amazing Spider-Man #1 for $16, and this tied with Incredible Hulk #1, which also had a small increase from $14 to $16 in near mint. As this new guide actually did some corrections on prices, we'll actually find that some of the biggest key Silver Age books actually fell in price from the first guide to the second, including Adventure Comics #247. Not yet considered to be a key, it fell from $2 to $1.10 in near mint. That's a 45% drop, quite drastic. A couple other changes we'll see. Detective Comics #225, also still not yet considered a key book, fell from 75 cents to 70 cents. And Our Army at War '83, also not yet considered a key book, featuring the first Sergeant Rock. It fell from 50 cents to 35 cents in near mint condition. Don't you wish you had stocked those up? Some books held steady, like X-Men #1, not really a popular title in the early 70s. He wasn't even being published with new original material at this time, and therefore #1 held its $6 price from the first guide to the second. And this made it actually one of the cheapest books on the list, and it would take decades before X-Men would really catch up to a lot of other books. So it's fascinating to look at these old Overstreet price guides and just see how the industry is starting to grow, how specific books are becoming hot or not becoming hot, how trends change, and we watch just this entire market unfold as people get more and more into comic book collecting.